College football is a long way off, but what helps the West Virginia and Pitt fans is to know that the Backyard Brawl is back for the first time in 11 years. So we are just about 4 months minus away from that, talking West Virginia football, of course, right here at the Voice of College Football, each and every Friday night with you, the guys that make it all work. Golden Blue Dude, check him out on his channel, Golden Blue Dude. Great to see you as always. And of course, Couz's Corner, Justin Walker joining us as well, provides content here on a regular basis as well as on his platform. Got to get on over there to check out his work as well. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing great.
Doing well.
And we've got a special guest in the house as well. Great to have Mike Osty from let's pull up his banner so everybody can be acquainted if you're not already. Mike joins us from Pittsburgh Sports Now.
Absolutely. Mike, yeah. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I know we've talked in the past about finally getting this together, and Mark, you and I talked a year or so ago. So happy to be a part of this. Yeah, for sure.
It is great to have you, and our timing could not be any better. The Pitt fan may not feel that way, but Pitt football has been at the center of the college football universe for the past few days with this Jordan Addison situation. We've all lived with this NIL now going on a year, but this has to be a landmark situation. This is one that's really hitting some people hard because this is the first direct comparison we could make and see that's just being publicized as to we got a first-rate elite player at his position, arguably the best in the country, the Biletnikoff Award winner, being offered more money elsewhere, and that being pretty well known, Mike, in regards to this situation. What's your take?
Well, it was kind of a weird situation for the Pitt fan, and at Pittsburgh Sports Now, we do cover Pitt. They're kind of the flagship team. We also do cover West Virginia and the umbrella site there of WV Sports Now. So it's kind of an overall scope there in Pittsburgh media. But on the Pitt focus, that news came out in the midst of the NFL draft, and soon after the Steelers selected Kenny Pickett. So I cover the Steelers as well at our Steelers Now site, and the unthinkable occurred. I never thought that he would either fall to the Steelers or would be available there, or it would just happen. It just seemed too ridiculous and good to be true for a Pitt fan that also is a Steeler fan. And it ended up happening. It ended up going down. But then kind of the balloon was popped a little bit for that Pitt fan. That, okay, they're excited, but Kenny Pickett's no longer going to help Pitt. He's going to maybe help the Steelers. And to worry about the current Pitt team now could maybe be minus Jordan Addison. And no matter what anybody says, and I know there are some reports now, it feels like some colleagues trying to maybe save the situation by talking about his connection to Caleb Williams and Maryland and being from the same area and all that. I'm not buying anything. It's about the NIL situation. It's about an NIL deal. In fact, some of the money that he could get off the reports from that deal, it would be better than being an NFL draft pick right now. Yep. So it does feel like it's the first domino to fall in the future that could easily be two super conferences, that could just basically be a pro situation, that could pretty much be free agency. And it does feel like that he's going after a money grab. Now, from my perspective, it's hard to be mad at any man for going to get his money, especially because he didn't have an opportunity to get in the NFL this year. Wasn't allowed to be an NFL draft pick this year in terms of needing to be at college longer to be eligible. So does that put that rule in question? Is that a conversation for the future to just let people go whenever they can? I would imagine if he could have been an NFL draft pick, he would have entered the draft. He would have been selected probably in the first round with so many receivers taken. Certainly after that would have been taken. So this wouldn't have been a thing. It sucks for the Pitt fan. It took a couple days with the processing because that's a rule that they can linger on for a couple days. As we're speaking right now, it's not officially official, even though many believe it is officially happening. So other programs getting involved too. And it was murky, to say the very, very least, because I'm not mad at the kid. I wouldn't be mad at the kid. And I think Pitt fans aren't even mad at the kid realistically. But he was physically in Los Angeles before it was actually processed. He was physically in Los Angeles Monday morning by many accounts before the news even officially broke that he was in the portal, even though the reports were out there he was going to get in the portal. So that's funky. That's not really with the rules either. And it is good for college football for USC to be good. It was a great job for Lincoln Riley to go take, even though he had success at Oklahoma, because, hey, that is Los Angeles. That is an historic program. The Pac-12 not as deep. It'll be easier to get that back to glory. But at the end of the day, it does feel like there's some shadiness to get it there. But it's going to be keeping up with the Joneses, and it will be a conversation to the future that programs like Pitt, like West Virginia, there's history there. There's success there, certainly historically for West Virginia and certainly now for Pitt. But are they going to be able to keep up with those major programs that always are going to be at a higher level in terms of elite status in bigger markets? They're going to pluck kids if they can offer them more money and name, image, and likeness, whether it be off the deal itself or just what's in the market, because there also are rumors that Pitt, with Aaron Donald and Larry Fitz and some legendary notable figures of former Pitt Panthers, tried to match the deal, and it still didn't change things. So that shows you a kid wants to be in that market if he can't get in the NFL. And Pitt and West Virginia, for example, won't be able to top in Los Angeles or a Miami or those situations, or a Texas or Alabama, just for the program situation.
Hey, Mike, I heard a rumor that Pitt may have matched an NIL offer. Is there anything to that, or do you know?
Well, that's what I was just alluding to. I heard that rumor too. I can't speak to it factually being the case. I don't think they could even admit that, really, since it doesn't appear that that's going to matter. But yeah, the reports were out there, and I heard the same thing. Our people heard the same thing. We talked about actually on my show that, yeah, there was a matching of the offer. Now, we don't know officially if they literally matched it, if they got close to it. I don't know because there also are rumors that Texas, Tennessee, who Pitt would play this coming year, as insane as that would be, Alabama, that they got involved. Are they involved off a smoke screen? Are they trying to offer more money? Is Pitt able to match the $3 million, which was reported, but not more if the other schools get involved? I don't know, but that's the rumor out there. Yeah, we heard the same thing. I don't know if it's factually true. I'm definitely lended to believe it was. And Aaron Donald and Larry Fitz and others being involved certainly appeared to be a factor. But it also appears that USC and Lincoln Riley are going to do whatever they have to do to make sure this happens as well. And it was about an NIL deal regardless.
Right. Yeah, I knew that they had tried to match it, or that was the rumor. I didn't know it was, former players or anything like that. But you said something earlier talking about the NFL draft. Honestly, I think this NIL thing could end up, in the future hurting the NFL, because if these players can make this much money before they even get to the NFL, right, and they decide, hey, I don't want to sacrifice my body because that, the NFL versus college football, it's more dangerous. You're putting your body on the line. But that's always been the goal, if you want to be at that level, because that's where the money is. Well, if you don't have to get there and put your body on the line and sacrifice your health, and you can get the money at the college level, this could potentially filter out some of those, athletes that's the only reason that they want to go.
It could. And it also is getting weird because the NFL and college football, part of making a kid stay in school for a few years before getting the NFL is about, they have a kind of secret partnership going on where the college football has become the minor league feeder system to the NFL. And whether that was years and years and years ago, where it was illegal to pay players, but obviously teams were doing it and some teams would get caught. And we all know about SMU and the 30 for 30 documentary. But if you watch that documentary, they got caught. They were brazen, but there were other schools doing the same thing that didn't have to face the same consequences. And the goal for many kids that would enter some of these schools, even prior to that era and going back 100 years, would be to just play sports. And obviously the money in the NFL was not always as plentiful and not always as great as it now is going back 30, 40 plus years ago. At that point, if you're a pro athlete in many respects, you're getting another job too. Certainly before that, it was almost like a part-time job with something else. Now, if you become a star, it's millions upon millions of dollars you're likely hitting. You want that guaranteed signing bonus. The NFL is different than a lot of other pro sports where you don't just get guaranteed money off your guaranteed contract regardless of what happens. It is off the guarantee bonus. You do want to hit it off that second contract. But to your point, the money that would match for a superstar off NIL might be the second contract, which could be 3-4 years down the road rather than the first one. But I would think that they would want to somehow figure this out together. Because, yes, the USFL is out there. Yes, the XFL is out there. But they are clearly below the NFL. The only way those leagues have had success, the XFL's success before the pandemic, USFL kind of having success to stabilize, is to be a secondary league where players could then maybe get to the NFL again, or another option for players who aren't good enough. They're not really competing with the NFL, no matter how much maybe some think or Donald Trump tried years ago. It's not happening. So you're going to always have the NFL up here. Those leagues below, maybe they're now minor leagues. But the only way to cut out the NIL situation would be letting a player maybe go right to the league whenever they can, even if it's after the freshman year, like Maurice Clarett tried to threaten the league and had that whole court case almost 20 years ago. But to your point, maybe it would be better to make more money in an NIL situation. So I don't know if there's ever going to be a cap, if there's ever going to be contracts, how they're going to figure this out together. Separate from that, though, I do think what needs to happen, because you can't put the genie in the bottle. You're never going to get rid of this now. And I do believe it is fair. For a while, the only people in the world that were not profiting off of a player's name, image, and likeness were the players. The coaches, broadcasters, media members, everyone involved in some way were getting broken off, but not the players. So like the Fab Five, they wore all those navy blue shirts. If they could do an NIL deal back 30 years ago, they wouldn't have wore the blue shirts. They would have been endorsed by everything under the sun, and Chris Webber would have got money off of that number 4 jersey. They would have been happy with that. But do you open it up to where you're paying everybody? Do you open it up to contracts? Do you make it just a pro situation? What do you do in that scenario? Yeah, that's going to be the whole other conversation. And you do have – it does seem like you should be able to be a pro whenever. If a franchise wants to employ you, you should be allowed to accept the employment, even if it's a bad decision because you maybe need more time.
Right.
But they got to figure it out together, I would think would be the successful thing. And I don't know what the answers are. The only thing I can think as an answer to make this a little easier for college football by itself is to tighten the window. Because someone threw this suggestion out there that you and I threw this out myself. You have a December window. So you have like a December and January window to go after even the national championship. So you have the other bowl games, the national title, a December and January window. Once February hits, it's closed. You're done. February and March, you're sitting, it's over. And then maybe the end of March or early April through May is another smaller window for after spring practice. Because that would be fair to players who, if you are a backup QB and you lose a competition, you can't be stuck. If another team wants you, then you can go out and transfer because you didn't win your job. But it can't just be whenever the spirit moves you. And if a coach sneezes the wrong way, you're out of there. And after spring practice, right? I mean, this isn't really fair to Pitt, to be honest with you. And this isn't
Mike. That's what we've talked about here a number of times, exactly what you've laid out. And I am no genius when it comes to this, but pretty much along the same lines, thought right out of the gate. When people compared this to NFL free agency, it was like, okay, I get that comparison, but no. There are restrictions and there are time periods within NFL free agency. Yeah. This is just, even before we contemplated the money and the NIL portion of this, the thought was a player any day can wake up and say, you know what, I don't like the food at the cafeteria. I'm going to transfer. My girlfriend broke up with me. I don't want to see her anymore. I'm going to transfer.
Everybody makes emotional decisions. You can't do that. Yeah.
But exactly to your point, Mike, the two reasonable times seem to be right at the conclusion of the season, whenever that is for that particular team. Maybe give a 30-day window, whether it's the last regular season game, the last bowl game, the national championship game for that particular team, and then do the same thing after spring practice when guys can get a feel for where they stand on the depth chart, have those conversations with their position coaches, and then figure out, okay, it's not working out for me here, bam. But then close it down, restrict it, limit it.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not a genius either, but it just seems simple. It doesn't seem like you're reinventing the wheel or doing anything crazy there. That does make sense. The players may not like that, but when you think about it, Jordan Addison would have had plenty of time to do this, and he still could have done this same thing, even though he wasn't losing a job. He would have had this post spring practice window if he wanted to have it. But there just has to be some, because I know for a fact from coaches have told us this. And this is more smaller program coaches. So we also do cover, say, Duquesne, Robert Morris, those coaches. Keith Dambrod, for example, has dealt with this where he's almost changing in and out rosters year after year, that it is hard because you are having players making decisions off of you sneezing the wrong way, or maybe actually wanting to go, have it out for you because you maybe don't give them the playing time that they want, and they can seek that revenge. The other end of it is, though, and this goes to a little bit of Bob Huggins and what's going on with the basketball program at West Virginia. I kind of know a little bit about this being the way too. Obviously, last season for WV basketball was horrendous. One of the worst in a while. Bob Huggins had 2 7-game losing streaks. It's basically his worst season. But he made it clear at the end of the year, we're going to have to change the roster. If you don't like to play in this one way, get out of town. So there are coaches who are using this the same way like a pro team were, where they would go to a player, and I know this has happened really throughout the country, go to a player and say, hey, I can't release you. This isn't a pro team, but I suggest strongly you transfer and use the transfer portal because I would like to move on from you. And that's the way we can both do this professionally speaking, even though we're in college. So that does happen where they're basically told to transfer, and fans may see, well, how are you losing all these players? This player's screwing over the coach. Sometimes the coach is telling the player, you need to leave. So that's not going to be reported that way. The school won't announce it that way because that would not be legal, or that wouldn't at least be nice, even if it's legal. But that does happen.
Yeah, me and Kuz were actually talking about that. We think that there was several situations this past year after the 2021 season where the coaching staff and certain players mutually decided that it was best for both West Virginia 100%. And the player for them to move on.
Yeah,
we 100% believe that happened. Real quick before we move on, I want to remind everybody: please hit the like button. That helps the video out a lot. It hits the YouTube algorithm, gets suggested more, and we get more people in the chat. I try to say that every time with my channel, so I'm going to try to do that with us. And I saw, a super chat from Terrence West. I thought that was kind of interesting, actually. He says, West Virginia getting Georgia leftovers. I guess natty or bust. First off, we didn't get any Georgia leftovers. I can't help that Kirby Smart doesn't know how to, develop or coach or scheme right the 4- and 5-star quarterbacks that he gets. And JT Daniels is not the first high-caliber quarterback that he's lost. I mean, immediately Justin Fields pops in my head. For whatever reason, he likes the lower-caliber quarterbacks. I don't know why. And what's going to happen is
it is working out pretty well.
It's working out, to be fair.
It is, but let's be honest. The defense is what won it for him last year. But if you're a Georgia fan, the concern would be eventually maybe those high caliber quarterbacks decide, I don't know if I even want to go over there. I mean, they don't use them, and then that might hurt your wide receiver, recruiting. So down the line, that could hurt Georgia. But to the point, JT Daniels is not a leftover, Georgia product. He got injured. Kirby decided to stay loyal with Stetson Bennett. And yes, it worked out because they had one of the best defenses I've ever seen. I mean, historically great.
He did get a receiver drafted, though, going back to the Steelers. They did draft George Pickens in the 2nd round. So they did get a receiver money into the NFL.
And JT won the job there twice.
Right.
He won the job in 2020 and in 21. He just lost it based on injury. I wanted to make one point to wrap up, unless you guys have anything else on the NIL situation. I wanted to make one last point, get your thoughts, and then I'd really love to cut loose Coos and Golden Blue Dude and let you three just go nuts, dicing up Pitt and West Virginia. My thought real quick here. We know that Greg Sankey and George Kliavkoff of the Pac-12 are in D.C. discussing, and I'm going to mute somebody just briefly because we got a little reverb. But we know that that's going on right now. So again, did anybody really need to be a visionary here? I pulled a video that I posted in 2013 after that Johnny Manziel situation to say, we need to get a handle on this because it's going to explode. Well, here we are 9 years later. And one of our big issues is that nobody runs college football. There is not a commissioner, there's not a council that runs college football. We used to think the NCAA ran college football, but they basically just allow schools to turn each other in and then take that information and go investigate, and then they hand down some penalties,
and then the school punishes itself.
And then the school punishes itself.
Right.
And what we really found out during COVID in particular is that the conference commissioners, they run the sport. They run their own conferences, but nobody runs the sport for the good of all. So why don't these conference commissioners get together and say, you know what? Let's run it like the NFL. Let's form a league, and we can take all this NIL money and we can redistribute it to a somewhat even status, for the good of the league. So we can have the West Virginia survive in this world and be able to compete and get ahead of this thing, well, which is too late, to Mike's point, too late to get ahead of it. But I just think this funneling through the conferences and the conference commissioners is the only way to go right now to salvage the sport to some degree, and the players are still going to profit and do just fine.
Well, that would be fantastic. But when you think about it, and my mind immediately went, if you're the SEC, what's your motivation to do that? Because clearly, if there becomes two super conferences, you're going to be one of them, if not just splitting yourself. You have Oklahoma and Texas, who were the elite programs on the field for Oklahoma, and certainly money-wise and history-wise for Texas, that leave the Big 12. And it's going to stabilize itself. Who knows the future? I've done shows. Everyone seemingly, when you talk about if West Virginia can get in the ACC, goes viral because everyone wants to hear about that conversation. And who knows if that'll happen? The ACC maybe wants another team or two for their TV deal. West Virginia seemingly fits in, but obviously there are pros and cons to it, and that's why it didn't happen before. But who knows the future of those conferences? But if you're the SEC, you're fine. You're fine. I mean, you almost have a surplus. I could argue that Texas and Oklahoma, despite the money, are going to be worse off as a program being in the SEC because they're not going to nearly contend for anything in that situation. So, yeah, that would probably be what you'd have to do if you want to have a fair, balanced league like, say, the NFL does, Mark. But I don't know if the commissioners or the program itself have that same vested interest, and it might almost become more of a situation if you go pro to what Major League Baseball has, where the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, they can spend so much money and fix issues, and if they have a bad year, they just buy new players. Whereas if the Pirates, for example, that we cover, if they have a bad year or draft someone and it doesn't work out, they're screwed for a decade. So that's the issue. I don't know if there's motivation on those superpower conferences, say the Big Ten and SEC. Those two conferences itself, why do they need – how could you motivate them to help out the Big 12, to help out the Pitt and West Virginias of the world, help out the ACC even with depth, and maybe even help out the Pac-12? Or I mean, who knows? They're the only two conferences that are sitting pretty, but I don't know what their motivation is to cooperate and make it a parity-driven, shared, equal system.
I guess the motivation is that the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Red Sox need the Royals and the Pirates and the Brewers to play baseball and have somebody to play. So true. They need them to be somewhat competitive. And I'm not saying let's take all the money from the rich and give it to the poor, but let's strike a balance. You know, if the Alabama quarterback signs a $3 million deal, you know, let him keep $2 million and throw $1 million in the pot and distribute it, or something that's somewhere between the wild, wild west and complete, I'll throw this term out, socialism, where everybody gets an equal share.
Right. Because they're
between the two, you know.
Yeah, there are going to be people who are
it's regulated.
Yeah, I hear that. And there are going to be people who go in that direction. Obviously, I don't want to have a political debate here, but you could argue that, and I'm sure the players would at a certain star level. You mentioned Johnny Manziel, even Terrell Pryor. He had a whole scandal off getting a tattoo paid for. I mean, crying out loud. Imagine that in this NIL situation
right now.
Right. I mean, it is a joke. It really was a joke then, but it's really a joke now. So when you think about it, those players like Jordan Addison would say to you, well, our older brothers or fathers, those generations way back in the day, you could have a coach who would come to a school, leave. I mean, Bobby Petrino did this. You could leave mid-season, screw over your recruits, and if they want to leave because they came to the school for you and not for any emotional connection otherwise, they then had to sit out a year, or the players weren't getting any money and they weren't getting a piece of the pie. Everybody else was getting it. So their players are going to say that the name, image, and likeness deal is cut because they're good and it is their name, image, and likeness. Why are they breaking off other people that wouldn't get the money unless they were good and were churning it? And so I don't know. I think you're going to have to find a way to do something like that, but doesn't mean the players lose the NIL money, because I'm sure any lawyer or any court would say if it's a deal between a player and an organization and it is about their name, image, and likeness, it's legally their money. You can't make them split it. So I don't know what you would do otherwise. I think a tighter window would at least allow it so it's not like big market poaching small market right before the season starts.
Fair enough. Well, we will get into Pitt in West Virginia. Pitt leads the all-time series 61-40-3. They get together for the first time in 11 years. Sorry, I had to mention that, Chris. But, we're looking at a situation. I have no stake in this thing, but I'm still love that Pitt and West Virginia are getting together, and especially that it's a Thursday night. So it's going to be national spotlight. Everybody watching college football is going to be locked in on this game. So it's going to be something special. Now I'll let you guys just have at it.
I think you got a couple of them muted there. I see. I see talking, but I don't.
They can unmute themselves. But
I didn't even see it.
There we go. Go to it.
There we go. I was going to say, I think it's going to look like a neutral site game too, because there's going to be probably 40,000 West Virginia fans, and I'm going to be one of them.
Yeah, we like to give our Pitt comrades a hard way to go about them not going to games. So we're going to see if we're going to have to back up what we talk about, right? We're going to have to show up and be loud as Mountaineer Nation. But I'm excited about this game. Probably more so than any opening. Well, I don't want to say more so. The opening game against Virginia Tech in 2017 was pretty exciting too.
Yep.
In Will Greer's first. This actually reminds me of that. We had Will Greer coming in. His first game was a Mountaineer playing Virginia Tech. Only that was a neutral site game though. That was a little different, but still, it's got that same feel to it. And for me, down here in the southern part of the state, Virginia Tech is just as big a rivalry to me as Pitt is. But I'm definitely looking forward to this game.
I think having it Thursday night is so perfect too that Mark alluded to, because for years and years growing up, it was the Thanksgiving night game. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to be Thanksgiving, but it was a situation, and that was before the NFL was playing on Thursday all the time. So you had even people, they could be in LA, they could be in Florida, they could be in the middle of the country, they could be in Michigan, Texas. They were watching the Backyard Brawl after they had their meal. It became that was when the spotlight was on the national rivalry. You mentioned the all-time record in terms of history, in terms of longevity. It is one of those longest tenured, and obviously they haven't played in a long time, but overall rivalries in college sports. You talk about what Pitt has had with the lineage of Dan Marino to Larry Fitz and all those Hall of Famers and legends, and they have the one national title. I know they say 9, but I also give Pitt fans crap for that, because 8 of those 9 were claimed 3 decades after they quote unquote were won. So that's a whole different conversation to how some kind of smudge those numbers. The West Virginia 15th winningest program. I mean, you have a lot going on in history, and then obviously a whole generation was lost. I mean, there are people that are at these schools. You mentioned you're in the southern part of the state. Somebody from there who's a student at West Virginia, or certainly someone from Pittsburgh, they probably currently care more about other rivalries than this one, even though, unlike certain rivalries, like I've always said that Maryland's a rival to West Virginia, but it's almost a geographic thing. Like someone from Pittsburgh who's a WU fan, do they really care if Maryland beats them? They're not going to lose any sleep over that. But someone from a certain portion of West Virginia near that DMV area may care about it. You could argue whether or not Virginia Tech is as big to certain areas and different rivalries but Pitt is a rival to everyone. They're at least familiar with it. And even if a generation has been lost, they now can get reborn to it. And you have the weirdness of two former, you mentioned Georgia. Technically, it's two former USC scrap quarterbacks that are going to play in this rivalry. So it's obviously a plus to have it back. And to credit both programs, by the way, even though they couldn't be in the same conference and they're in the same media marketing away, so it didn't make sense 10 years ago when it was split, and who knows about the future. I know for a fact, too, that both programs did work together to make sure this rivalry could eventually come back and to get played as often as possible. It will take a break for a couple years after it gets this new life now, but then they're going to recharge it again for several more years later on, almost a decade from now. So that's all positive, that these programs care about it and want this rivalry to happen, even if they can't be in the same conference, they're not forced to, which is big because when you look at basketball, you can easily do it, but in a college football schedule, you got your conference games. You need to have the out-of-conference games be good enough, but not too brutal, because if you lose them, then you're bumped down from where you could be standing-wise. It's a whole mental mind game to how you're going to do the schedule. And these programs just don't care about that for the purpose of this rivalry, and they just want it to be played no matter what. So that's a positive. Yeah, I think both programs are happy and both fan bases are happy that this is happening. And it's happening the right way, too, with the Thursday night, the national stage, to start kind of this rebirth.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that. Whenever I found out that, we were going to play Pitt again, I was like, man, it's been so long. Yeah. I had forgotten how excited I got for that game. And because it's been so long, I'm probably even more excited than when we played on a regular basis. In fact, me and one of my Pitt subscribers, we got a bet going on because we were so pumped. So if Pitt were to beat West Virginia somehow, some way, by some miracle, then I would have to wear a Pitt jersey on my channel and do a video. But, when West Virginia beats Pitt, he has to sing Country Roads, and I get to record it and put that out on YouTube forever. That's how awesome jacked we are. That's how jacked we are.
That's an awesome bet there, yeah.
Chris, you need to get yourself to Vegas. I hear the line's 8.5, and if you're so sure about the West Virginia win there, I think you could make some money.
That's true.
Yeah, I'll lay the points, and I'll take them on the money line.
I like them on the points of the 8.5 spread. I don't know if I can see West Virginia winning it. I mean, Addison not being there changes it, but it's over a touchdown in a – Pitt lost some games they shouldn't have lost even last year during their special year. That's why they weren't really a playoff team or viable for it at all year. So who knows? But it'll depend on
West
how
Virginia did the
plays.
same thing too. There was like 4 of our 6 losses were 50-50, and that Texas Tech game. What happened there was Oklahoma beat us twice. All right, we should have beat Oklahoma, and that first half against Texas Tech, those kids were not there mentally. Their bodies were there, but their minds were not there. Well, we come out in the second half, and they're ready to go. It was just too little too late. Yeah. We did come back, but, of course, Texas Tech comes back and kicks the game-winning field goal, and that's when I felt like the season changed, because even though we lost to Oklahoma, it was competitive. We were close to beating them, so I was excited. After losing to Texas Tech, I felt a complete shift in the season. I was thinking maybe an 8-4. Once that loss happened, I knew 8-4 was not going to happen, and I was scared we were going to miss a bowl because I had that as a gimme win. So yeah, Pitt was the better team last year as far as the season goes. Yeah. But I think a lot has changed, and I don't think it was as big of a gap as it appears as far as record versus record and the games that we saw. So I think the gap was shrunk, and I think West Virginia made some great moves that people don't realize just how great they are. We've been relying on our defense for the past 2 years. I mean, even after we lost Tyke Smith, our defense was still pretty good last year. It wasn't elite like it was in 2020, but it was still pretty good. Our offense was crap. Total crap. Yeah. We were in games that we should not have been in.
Yeah, the WVU defense was number 1 in the country early in the season 2 years ago as well, just even after the Vic Koenig scandal. So it's hard to blame the defense for the last couple of years. But yeah, it's all – I think my only devil's advocate is if they would have played last year, and Pitt certainly they lost to Western Michigan. You don't know if they would have lost to West Virginia. It wouldn't have been surprising. But Kenny Pickett versus Jared Dagey, that's a difference. That's a
That's not a good
gigantic
matchup.
difference. You figure the JT Daniels versus Keaton Slovis is a much closer scenario. Slovis also had success, but it's been a couple years. He fell off a little bit at USC, even though he did lead them to Pac-12 success a couple years ago. So that's a closer gap. But Kenny Pickett to Jared Degge, even though Jared Degge put up some numbers at times, that it felt like Jared Degge would have made some mistakes, and that would have been it.
Yeah. By the way, that was a great weekend for me. Pitt lost to Western Michigan, and West Virginia beat Virginia Tech. That was one of the best weekends I've had in a long time.
Yeah.
Mike, you referenced the Tony Dorsett National Championship of 1976. I started watching college football a little bit after that, and Pitt was a player there with Penn State, and that was the big rivalry game at the end of the year into the 80s. Then about mid-80s, Foch, Fazio, and on, Pitt became this 7 or 8 win program. And pretty much you can look at the last 35 years, and that's pretty much what it's been. Now they jump out. Pat Narduzzi's done a nice job. They've competed in the ACC. That's now 2 division titles since 2018. And they get the 10 or 11 win season. They go to a major bowl game, win the ACC. Do you see this doing anything for Pitt long term? Or do you see that just a blip on the radar and they're going to stay at that 7 or 8 win level?
It's tough to say because that is the type of season that you want to have. Like, for example, the season that Pitt just had, and you could argue that Clemson was down, and yeah, the ACC's rules are different than the Big 12, where you got to be 1 or 2 in the Big 12, and the ACC, like you mentioned, the 2 division titles. Well, one of them, Pitt was in just for winning the division. They weren't really a good team that year, and then Clemson just boat raced them. Obviously, last year, Pitt was legitimately good, but they did have the bad loss, which took them out of the playoff race. And then you lose the bowl game, but that was without Kenny Pickett. So there's different parameters to everything. But Pitt had a real special year that you can't knock last year. Right? West Virginia, honestly, let's be real. West Virginia would like to have that year Pitt just had an O'Neal Brown. That's the goal. They want to do that. Even if you say it's the Big 12, if they could mirror that year, this year, the next year, West Virginia fans are going to take it. But for the future, you got to figure that these type of programs, the way that you ever get back to that consistently is by having a special year to kick it off. Because then you got to figure that's part of why Slovis is there. Now, Grant Addison might be part of that to throw to the best receiver in the country. But if Pitt was a 6-win team, are they getting a great transfer quarterback to come aboard? I don't know. So you have to understand the perception of Pitt, too. We're bringing up that Western Michigan loss. I remember covering Pitt that back after that loss, some of my colleagues, the show that we had post-game, other people, Pitt fans wanted Narduzzi fired then. We are now speaking not even a year later, and obviously Pitt had their best season in 35-plus years. Narduzzi not going anywhere, and Pitt had Kenny Pickett get as the only first-round quarterback, and who knows about the future. You got to figure that's going to build up the future, going to help recruiting, help players, help the future of the program, because Pitt for a while would even lose WPIL kids to West Virginia and some of those schools because they had so many years where they weren't competitive. It feels like some of those local kids now want to help the future of Pitt and want to keep building Pitt. You're even seeing that with tweets after the Addison situation that we want to turn this into more of a special thing, our culture and all those type of comments. So it's not a negative in any way. It's the type of year that West Virginia would want to have and would want to mirror. But there were some extenuating circumstances with Clemson being down, and Clemson surged at the end of the year. So Clemson could easily turn around and be dominant again. I don't know. Pitt's never going to – I do not believe – I'll answer it this way. I do not believe that Pitt is ever going to become – even if all conferences stay the same, I don't think Pitt is ever going to become what Clemson was for 5 or 6 years. I don't think they're going to go on that type of run. I don't. Maybe Miami would even come back with NIL deals. They could quickly ascend, like USC is trying to quickly ascend in the Pac-12. Maybe Florida State can do the same thing and quickly ascend. So it's going to be too hard for Pitt to ever do a run like Clemson just had. But Pitt shouldn't go all of a sudden win 4 games. I don't think Narduzzi's going to get fired. I don't think it's going to just revert to what it was. But Pitt should contend for the Coastal again. Speaking on this coming year, Pitt should contend for the Coastal again. They should be favored against West Virginia for an out-of-conference win right away. And who knows about the ACC crown again. But Yeah, it was a long time where Walt Harris, Dave Wanstadt, I mean, it was mediocre Pitt football despite the history. Even when Larry Fitz was there, they didn't have winning seasons. You look at that 2007 year, the West Virginia fans, obviously, I was in school there. You don't want to speak of. But Pitt won 5 games that year. It wasn't like a good year for Pitt, even though they're going to brag about it for that one game. This is it. This is the team to build on, the year to build, and I think they will. But losing Jordan Addison right after that year when it's just NIL, that's not a good thing. That does look like kind of a black eye for the future of the program. But they're never going to be a dynasty. I don't think honestly, and this sucks to say to keep it real, the way college football is, there really are only a handful of programs that probably have the opportunity to ever be a dynasty. It doesn't mean that West Virginia can't have a special year and do what Pitt just did once every decade. But a 5-6 year stretch like Clemson had, like Ohio State always had, like USC had in the early 2000s, like Miami had for 2 decades when they kind of were doing murky things, that almost seems impossible for these type of programs. But I don't think Pitt will do that. But they'll still be good and competitive in the coming years. And it's helped by this special year that West Virginia wants.
I think what you said spoke to 2 things real quick. Hold on. Number one, West Virginia has been able to, have that success, that magical year, and Dana Holgerson drove the program into the ground. So West Virginia was actually used to what Pitt just did and more. Yeah. And then Dana Holgerson came in and drove it straight into the ground. And then the second point was, West Virginia going 6-6. That points to how important and amazing hiring Graham Harrell was, because we did get an amazing quarterback going 6-6 in JT Daniels. And it was because we hired offensive coordinator Graham Harrell. So I thought, that just people are overlooking the magnitude of that hire. Our offense is going to be so much better. Yeah. And hiring Graham Harrell is a direct, fruit. You get JT Daniels.
Yeah, I mean, imagine this game though without JT Daniels. I think, and that was surprising in a way, even with rumors. It is one coup for Neil Brown, in addition to bringing in Graham Harrell and having JT Daniels, that there are many West Virginia fans, and I will be honest, I'm not going to mention these players' names, but during last season covering the Mountaineers, I would get DMs from former players saying, "We're out on Neil Brown. I'm sick of this. We're done with Neil Brown." So So you bring in JT Daniels, you bring in a coach like that to work under Neil Brown and fix this offense. That is big for the perception. Because I then heard from some of those players surprised saying, okay, now I'll wait and see a little bit. Imagine Pat Narduzzi's bringing in a great transfer after the best season the program's had in 4 decades. West Virginia's bringing in a great transfer, maybe the second best option if you can't get Slovis to some argument, or maybe they're equal, half of one of the worst seasons West Virginia had in a while. So that actually speaks to Neil Brown a little bit in terms of Shane Lyons is going to give him room, but you can't just lose forever. You mentioned the Virginia Tech win. That's the biggest win. Virginia Tech ended their season in horrible fashion. So how big is it? There's pressure on Neil Brown to have a better year, but getting a recruit like that and getting guys to jump aboard, even though you haven't really proved it on the field, and your great offensive mind at Troy has not translated to bigger conference football, he's taken the humble pie. He's willing to have somebody else help him out, and he brought in a top recruit off a transfer like JT Daniels that was a 4 or 5-star kid coming out of high school that can be something more. That's actually great for Neil Brown to do that off of a poor season. So that was why that was kind of surprising. But that's the best news West Virginia football fans have had in a year, is bringing in JT Daniels, really. So
absolutely. I thought that was huge, considered that this guy won the starting job at USC and at Georgia multiple times at both schools. Yeah. And West Virginia, without JT Daniels, to your point, Mike, about Jared Dagey, and then, of course, he had already moved on, but they had a bottom 3 in the conference quarterback room. Starting quarterback, regardless of who was going to win the position. You look at the Big 12 quarterback rooms, and they jump to a top 2 or 3 situation now, as long as JT Daniels stays upright.
Yeah, and a true freshman in Nico. It's cool to have, and that was a great recruiting coup for Neil Brown as well. But because I got some pushback from fans that, well, what does this say to Nico? Was he lied to? Or how is that going to help the future of West Virginia recruiting because he might have been lied to? It's keeping up with the Joneses. This speaks to the pressure on Neil Brown. If he went with a true freshman, half of how bad it just was off of how special it just was for Pitt, even with the conference in uncertainty. He's risking that by the time everything's ready to go, he's gone. He's not going to be there. He had pressure to get it done now, and Nico will have plenty of time. JT Daniels is not going to be there for 4 years. You're looking at a year or two. So it's what you had to do. It was a big, big coup for Neil Brown to bring in JT Daniels. It's still great to have Nico. But yeah, Mark, if you had Nico, Garrett Green on the roster, you're choosing between the two of them for the Backyard Brawl rebirth on the national stage. There hasn't been a real pass package for Garrett Green all year. Even when he gets in there, it's mostly run plays. That just would have been hard to get excited about. You're going to be excited about the rebirth of the rivalry, but West Virginia fans would have known they're just undermanned. Now it's legit. Get ready to go. I mean, it's a whole different scenario with JT Daniels there.
Ed Rogers really wants us to answer questions, so I'm going to answer the first one because it's an easy one. JT Daniels was also being pursued by Missouri and Oregon State, Ed, and I will sift through the rest of these questions and jump in with them. I didn't see a whole lot except who's going to win this and who's going to win that, people wanting us to make predictions, 5 and 6 months in advance like they always do, which is great.
Right. Yeah, imagine if we recorded this, because I know you guys first reached out to me about a month and a half ago. If we would have recorded this then, Lord, we'd have to redo the whole thing.
Yeah. And what adds to it is Pitt losing Addison. That's a bit. So it's not just West Virginia gaining JT Daniels. It's also Pitt losing Addison. Like that, things have completely changed within 2 months as far as people's outlook on this game. I mean, I'm a West Virginia fan. Of course, I'm always going to have faith, but, get kind of, a little nervous because Pitt had a great year last year and not so much for us. I know some games were closer than people realize, and the 6-6 was deceiving, but, Pitt won the ACC and we barely got to a bowl. Now, we got JT Daniels and a great offensive coordinator, which is the reason why we got JT Daniels. Turn around, Addison's entered the transfer portal. I mean, it just keeps getting better and better as a West Virginia fan right now.
I have a question for you, Mike.
Sure.
Some of the chatter that I've been seeing online is that it wasn't strictly NIL that made Jordan Addison leave, but he was not happy with the new offense and the new quarterback. And I've heard some Pitt fans complaining that Keaton Slovis has not looked very good this spring. Is there anything to that?
That's the other end of it. I don't believe that there was any motivation for this outside of money. Or if I'm going to rank it on why Jordan Addison's in the transfer portal, it's NIL money. We're looking at like 99% and then maybe anything else. I mean, if that wasn't there, if it's big market, it's big money. That's really the crux of this. And again, I don't believe the relationship to Caleb Williams either. But that's been brought up. I will say that it's hard to evaluate Slovis off of just watching occasional Pac-12 games at USC. That his best year was a couple years ago, and then obviously I haven't really seen him on the field yet. That has been rumbled a little bit. It seems like, and obviously Pitt, you're talking about coordinator and JT Daniels coming for somebody they're going to work together. Kenny Pickett's coordinator, Mark Whipple, is gone. So right. It's also a whole new offensive situation in terms of coaching. Granted, it should be a similar situation, similar system. It's not going to be catastrophically crazy. And you do figure, and Slovis, I'm sure, was secretly punching a desk when the Addison news came out because he thought he was thrown to the Biletnikoff winner. He's leaving the big market to throw the Biletnikoff winner. He's not going to be there unless something wild occurs. So I basically, if you're Pitt, and you have Kenny Pickett leaving because he just ran out of time. He was going to go to the NFL. There was no way for him to play any longer. Your options were Patty, who it's polarizing. There are some Pitt people that think Patty's a dog and Patty can get it done and who knows what Patty can do and give him the reins. There are others that obviously think that he's not nearly Kenny Pickett, even though it took Pickett several years to get to what he became as well. 3 years ago, Pitt fans hated Kenny Pickett. So Pitt fans don't want to hear that. But they did not like Kenny Pickett, maybe even as recent as 2 years ago when he became what he became. So if you think Patty was fantastic, maybe this didn't need to happen. But it clearly feels like Pitt thought, okay, Pickett's gone. Patty's not nearly that. If we want to be competitive and keep it going, like Mark's alluding to, maybe build a semi-mini dynasty here, we got to keep it going now. And if you're talking about transfers and who you're going to get, Slovis, before JT Daniels was up for grabs, Slovis was the top guy out there. So that was a hit. Looking at it from a West Virginia perspective, I'm sure you were thinking, oh, that's kind of like not missing a beat a little bit. If he ends up being worse, it's hard to believe he's going to be as good as Kenny Pickett just was with continuity of Mark Whipple. So Pitt is going to regress at quarterback, you would imagine, to start the year. It doesn't mean Slovis sucks. It means he's not a first-round Heisman candidate like Kenny Pickett was.
Oh, yeah. No, I would agree with that. That makes sense. And I agree with you about the NIL thing, because to me, if it was about the quarterback play and the coaching, he would have left a month ago.
There you go. That's the thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's my thought. I just wanted to hear it from someone who covers Pitt.
Yeah.
And I'll say this too, Mike.
That's just fans being naive, maybe, about the whole situation. I don't know. Sorry, Mark. Didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I was just going to say, I'll say this as well, Mike, in regards to, because I am a guy that stays up till 2:30 in the morning watching Pac-12 games.
I've done it as well.
Guilty. Guilty.
Yeah, what's coming for full circle, as you all three know, is that JT Daniels went down in the first game of 2019 to give Keaton Slovis the opportunity. He throws 30 touchdown passes and it sets the world on fire.
Yeah.
And then early in the next season, I remember the first 2 weeks of the season, and this was the COVID season, so the Pac-12 got off to a late start. They played a couple games in which he looked like Peyton Manning his last season, where it was all guile and smarts and putting the ball exactly where he needed to, because something looked radically wrong with him. And I've got some USC people that I come on here and I said, he doesn't look like the same guy. It looks like he's hurt. And that rumor persisted that entire season that he was hurt. His TD to pick ratio suffered, and it did last year before he got hurt again. His statistics aren't nearly the same. And again, to watch the games in addition to the stats, hopefully he's healthy now. Of course, we want him to be healthy, but he didn't look like the same guy after the 2019 season.
Well, you are going off of, I think it's 58 touchdowns that he already has thrown in college football before now coming to Pitt. So that's a big number, especially for a guy that's not an elite Heisman candidate, but certainly has had success leading USC to that Pac-12 contention a couple years ago. But as you mentioned, that's a large chunk from several years ago, and the interception to TD ratio changed obviously more recently. And I'm sure, again, he was thinking, how can I get back to what I was if I'm not the same guy? Let me play with a Biletnikoff winner, the best receiver in the country. Jordan Addison helped Kenny Pickett as much as Kenny Pickett helped Addison. It's a benefit. Tom Brady is the GOAT. His best year of his individual career was with Randy Moss. So you're going to obviously be better with the best players you have. But again, if you're a Pitt fan, you got to be happy, because your other option is the backup to Pickett, or maybe competing for JT Daniels or somebody else. I'm sure any Pitt fan could say that there's no way to argue JT Daniels is any better than Slovis right now. You're basically arguing coaching, you're arguing system, you're arguing situation. It's a lot of a gut feeling as we're speaking now. But I know a lot of Pitt fans were very excited when Slovis came aboard. That really ignited the Pitt fans just as much as JT Daniels coming to West Virginia ignited Mountaineer fans. So it really is to see what happens on the field. And if Jordan Addison isn't there, that does maybe even it up, because JT Daniels has a good situation in terms of coaching. You do lose Letty Brown. He's not going to play with him. Yeah, there are receivers who are good, but he's not having the Biletnikoff winner there. So that would have been a major advantage for Slovis that now is equalized out.
I have a question for you. A couple questions. So the first thing was, one of my great subscribers, and I consider him a friend. He is a Pitt subscriber. Talk is Pitt. He's in the chat. He claims that the two transfers that y'all got through the transfer portal, one from Akron, and I can't recall where the other one is from, makes up losing Addison. Would you agree with that? And if not, how far off would you say that would be?
I know there are some Pitt people who do believe that there are other players that then would be put to step up, or you mentioned off of other transfers, and it wouldn't be like the Pitt offense isn't going to be horrendous. Even in the loss to Western Michigan and other bad losses, Pitt scored points. They put points up all year long, even when they were losing games. It really was, conversely to West Virginia, they had defensive issues last year. So they are going to score points. But it is impossible for me to say, and it does feel like a little bit of putting lipstick on a pig, for anyone to argue that losing the Biletnikoff winner, who would have been a first-round draft pick, I am confident to say that if he could have entered the NFL draft this year, he would have been a first-round pick. Look at the draft. And arguably the best receiver in the country. It certainly has an award to argue that you are fine, or it's not a hit, or it's no big deal, or no one's caring about it. Look at the energy they're expending. Clearly, there's some animosity there. It is a hit. And Addison stepped up to be that game changer by himself that could take over games as much as Pickett. Look, as much as Pickett tried to find him. If Pitt can be more of a versatile offense and get the running game more involved than it certainly got a little bit at the end of the year, not the beginning of the season, and maybe others can step up, maybe there's room for others. It's the same thing with, I mean, that's something true as well, though, to be fair to that commenter, that everybody always focuses on players, look at Messidor, leaving programs. But there are also players coming to the program. So Pitt did not just lose and that be it, and that's the end of the day. They did add. You bring in Slovis is a major coup for as well. So I don't think Pitt's offense is going to be a piece of crap and not be able to do anything and just be embarrassing. I do think they're not missing a beat as much as they possibly could, but losing Addison is just a major deal. I mean, that's just a major deal. Slovis isn't going anywhere now, but you got to figure that was part of convincing him to come. And there's just no way around that's not a major deal.
Okay. The second thing that I want to ask you is the thing that really gets me excited about the offense, and I said it before, but I want to relate this to Pitt. So the reason I'm so excited about our offense is not just because of Graham Harrell and not just because of JT Daniels, is both of them together. They know each other. Right. JT knows the system. As a Pitt fan, does it concern you that Slovis is a little bit, because this is what I've heard, he's a little bit behind on the offense. And I'm not saying he won't learn it and all this also, but right now he's a little bit behind. Would you feel better if you had a situation like West Virginia where he had an offensive coordinator that he was familiar with, the system that he's familiar with, and how long do you think, Slovis, how long is it going to take for Slovis to be, where he needs to be?
Obviously, having continuity and having chemistry together is a big deal, and you'd rather have that than not have that. That's even a situation that's gone on in the NFL, where sometimes you're trying to pair a quarterback with a coordinator or a coach that they're familiar with, or at least want to try to work together. That happens in all sports. You want to have that. That's definitely a positive and definitely an advantage in that sense. But this is a different college football world, and this is different than if you were just having the next man up. Slovis is a veteran player who's had to do it over years and years. And yes, he's different, as Mark alluded to, that it's kind of different than if maybe you had him 3 years ago. He did kind of go through a difference of himself, and maybe that's part of injury. But it's an advantage to have that chemistry and have that continuity. But I'm not going to in any way be out here saying that Slovis is not going to have a good year. Not going to be a good quarterback. I do think Slovis is going to be good at Pitt. I do think the offense will be similarly run than what it was even with Mark Whipple gone. I do think points will be put up. I do think maybe it won't be a scenario where a quarterback is going to maybe single-handedly carry you through games or try to or have the ability to, certainly early in the year. But we're speaking right now in May when we're doing this. So there's still plenty of time to get things together. Spring practice can be certainly overestimated. To even Neil Brown talking a lot and how comfortable he is, how excited he is. Pitt fans could say that. How do you know? Really? I mean, this is very early in the process. Who knows until you get on the field? So that advantage is nice. That's probably why JT Daniels is there. Because it's not like West Virginia has been a powerhouse recently, even though obviously you talked about the Dana Holgorsen years and the Orange Bowl and all that. That's far enough ago and it's not like you're having Will Grier come for Dana Holgorsen in that situation. maybe you're coming now for a coach, and you're coming in a situation that the program might not be as well off, but you're trying to come for the chemistry of the coach. But that's an advantage for WVU in that situation. But I think Slovis is going to be good. I definitely think Pitt fans are excited about Slovis. They should be excited about Slovis. He's going to be good. I think he's in a better situation now than maybe he would have been at USC. But also part of him leaving is Lincoln Riley didn't appear to want him to be there any longer. So that kind of go back to what we were saying earlier, that it was in both interest to have him finish out somewhere else. But not having Addison is a major hit. If he is there, he can make up for a lot of things. Pitt has some work to do, of course. They're not a perfectly built roster. But Pitt should contend in the Coastal again. I'm not saying they're going to win the ACC again, but they certainly should be a competitive, good team. I do think they're favored and likely going to beat West Virginia, but you just never know in a rivalry game like that. And I do think Slovis will have a good year. But it might be where he makes a little bit more mistakes and throws more picks, like Mark talked about, than what Pitt was used to last year and the year before, when Kenny Pickett just lit the world on fire after struggling before. So you may see some mistakes from a quarterback, but you could see that from JT Daniels too. Knowing a guy and working together before is different than having this marriage partnership now at a new school. And they're both trying to learn where things are and where class is and where campus is and where this is and where that is. So that's part of it as well.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. But that's why I'm excited about our offenses, because, I know those two guys know each other very well. So the learning curve for JT Daniels is going to be next to nothing. He's just going to have to get in shape, get in rhythm. But as far as knowing the playbook and the scheming and stuff, there's nothing to learn really.
Yeah, I do see the comment there from Talkis Pitt about the defense. And the future of Pitt, you figure last year would help recruiting. So that's what you're alluding there with the QB recruit, like WVU got with Nico. But Pitt's defense, they were okay at times, but really bad at other times. And that was the most surprise of last year, because Pat Narduzzi, as you guys know from Michigan State, was a defensive guy. So if Pitt's season didn't end up being what it was last year, and Pat Narduzzi did get fired and the tenure didn't become saved and have a special year that Pitt hadn't experienced in 4 decades, it would have been ironically because his defense didn't match the historic nature of Kenny Pickett and the offense and what he was doing offensively, which would have just been weird. So it's interesting to see a Pitt guy and a Pitt fan excited about the defense. That does need to really pick it up from last year, which was more of a veteran group with John Patrician and company. But that Pitt defense would be talked about as the reason why Pitt's season didn't go where it was supposed to go last year, with Clemson taking a year off, if it didn't go where it ended up being, because the defense let them down time after time.
Even with giving up all those points, Mike, they seem to be doing something right up front. They've finished in the top 3 or 4 in the nation in sacks, like 3 consecutive years.
Yeah, no, I mean, they definitely get the pass rush going. That's an Narduzzi defense. They're going to bring the pass rush. It's similar to the Pittsburgh Steelers. You can bring the pass rush. Sometimes I feel like where teams rank, though, in sacks and pass rush can be a little bit misleading to the overall defense, because you look at the Steelers, TJ Watt ties the sack record. They've been the best sack team in the NFL for 4 or 5 years running, but the defense has been allowing points left and right for several years in a row. So, what is it? How elite is the Steelers defense if the points are still coming on the board? Watch some of those games, and you're not feeling the defense is that great, even though the sacks are there. So, I would say the secondary for Pitt is what would maybe let them down a lot last year, maybe more so than the D-line.
Before we let everyone go, I want to make sure that everyone's aware of what we've got here. So Mike Ostie from Pittsburgh Sports Now. Mike, let people know where they can find you if they're unaware at this point.
Sure. If you don't know, now you're going to know. At Mike Ostie 11 on Twitter. Everything is kind of linked there. Pittsburgh Sports Now is the outlet in Pittsburgh, and it's a credentialed digital outlet there, kind of a competitor, maybe another one in the market. Done a lot of things over the years with the Trib, with PXI, with the Fan, with other outlets here in the Pittsburgh market. Also, we do have WV Sports Now, which is a part of our Now family of networks, and that does cover the Mountaineers, of course, Steelers Now, and Pittsburgh Sports Now. All those Now sites are connected to that umbrella. And there's even a transfer site, actually, about the transfer portal that is kind of erupted. That's a little bit of a national site as well. That's kind of spurned from all those. So I would say find me on Twitter at MikeOssie11. You'll find the rest of everything there. Also, Pittsburgh Sports Live is our YouTube channel that's affiliated with a lot of these sites in the Pittsburgh market. So find a lot of my shows, no matter where they are. They eventually go as video shows there and can be housed there. So find a couple of my shows there where we talk about a lot of this same stuff. So Pittsburgh Sports Live on YouTube, subscribe, like it there. Find a lot of these shows, my takes there with somebody else, and then Pittsburgh Sports Now and the corresponding Now Network sites for sure in the Pittsburgh market, which does include covering West Virginia because of Morgantown's proximity to Pittsburgh and that market DNA, which, as these guys know, is part of why West Virginia wasn't a part of the ACC 10 years ago, in addition to other academics things. You didn't need to get both WVU and Pitt because of the media market being the same. Now I don't think that's as big of a deal. So I do argue on why that's a different ballgame and not as big of a deal in a recent show over there on PSL as well.
Coos, you've been tearing it up. Let us know what you've been up to.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Coos' Corner. I'm also on Twitter at Coos206, as Mark's showing there on the screen. I'm trying to see if I can use Instagram and TikTok a little bit. I've really not mastered those yet by any means. But
I'm everywhere but TikTok. I've not yet mastered TikTok either.
Yeah,
I feel like
I think it's my age maybe, but
I can't bring myself to do it either.
Not really my forte, but I'm trying. But I'm really just using it to promote my YouTube channel anyway.
Yeah.
But YouTube at Coos' Corner, I cover primarily West Virginia football. I do national stories as well, a lot of Big 12 stuff. I will do an occasional West Virginia basketball video, and I want to give a shout out to one of Mike's colleagues, Mr. Ethan Bach. I've had the privilege of working with him before.
Yeah, he's with us at WV Sports now. He's actually our basketball beat writer and does a lot of
I did. I've had privilege to work with him a couple times, but yeah, just Coos' Corner, COUZ''S. Look me up on YouTube.
Folks, these guys make it happen between Justin and between Chris, Golden Blue Dude, them taking time away from their YouTube channels to supplement what we do here at the Voice of College Football on our West Virginia channel. So thank you to both of you. Golden Blue Dude, what you got for us?
We're still on the grind in the off season, but regular season is going to be here before we know it. So I need to get some previews and predictions in.
One more topic we needed to hit on is West Virginia signed a North Dakota State linebacker, Jasir Cox. He's won 3 national championships, so he brings a little bit of a winning vibe, if nothing else. 124 tackles in his career, 58 last year as an All-Missouri Valley Conference player. Is this significant?
It is significant, but it was also expected. I think it's one of the bigger signings on the defense. Him, Marcus Floyd. I think he was a really big sign for West Virginia, and we got a nice depth piece in Lockhart from Georgia Tech. Kind of helped with the sting from the Mesidor loss.
Yeah, I think Cox is a big pickup. Probably underwhelming to some because he came from North Dakota State. North Dakota State's not your average FBS school. They're the Alabama ×2, so to speak. But and he's also the younger brother. I don't know how many people know this, but he's the younger brother of Jabril Cox, I don't know a whole lot about Jabril Cox, but I do know he was a good NFL player, or is a good NFL player, I guess. But I don't know. I think they list him as a linebacker, but I think he's probably going to, based on his size, it sounds like they're probably going to bring him in to play that spear position. Maybe I'm not 100% sure, but that seems to be what most of the West Virginia media folks are saying. So, but I'm excited about it. It was a position of need, feel some depth. And this staff, say what you want, but they've been pretty good at finding diamonds in the rough, so to speak, from that FCS level.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I think this will be another one. And Golden Blue did mention this Mike Lockhart from Georgia Tech. Guy's only been playing college football for 4 years. He didn't start playing football until he was a senior in high school, and he was expected to start at Georgia Tech this year on the defensive line. So, in my opinion, his ceiling's probably very high because he's still learning the game. So, I'm excited about him.
Yeah, that's why we never worry about the defense since Neil Brown's been there, because he picks up pieces and they fit perfectly. We might be able to use Marcus Floyd in pure safety positions, from time to time now.
Yeah, I mean, again, WVU's defense has been underrated the last couple of years. It is And this is kind of the converse of Pat Narduzzi. If Pitt would have had their year ruined by the defense not being good enough and not matching the offense, that would have been ironic since Narduzzi's more of a defensive guy and the offense carried him through to a special year. West Virginia's had the defense not be matched by the offense the last few years. So the offense kind of has let down the defense, and that's ironic for Neil Brown, who was a great offensive mind at Troy. So now trying to marry the two together is a bigger deal, and maybe he can kind of focus in on maybe more so himself, involving himself in the defense, even though the defense is already straight, because as you mentioned, the offense kind of maybe could take care of itself with a quarterback and a coach that kind of know each other and could mend together and mold together. So we'll see what happens there. But I do think Neil Brown this offseason saved the perception a little bit by these moves here, because there were Mountaineer fans that you can point to Virginia Tech and point to a couple other wins, but you can also say those wins are overrated with Tech not really being that good. It's hard to look at a staple win. You look at getting in a legitimate bowl game and beating Army, who was a solid team that year, and then taking a step back. So I know you get a lot of jokes, and I've got a lot of jokes too of, well, in order to be if you're saying trust the climb, you got to literally be climbing. You can't be in neutral. You can't be falling. That's not climbing. So is West Virginia really climbing? And then you bring in JT Daniels. You bring in stud transfers like this, despite the program not winning last year. That maybe shows there's a bit of a climb. And I do think there's a little bit of a rope now, especially maybe that's been increased. But this next year is an important year on the field. I mean, it's a results-based business. If West Virginia only wins 5 or 6 games this coming year and misses a bowl game or barely gets in one, or it's not one that anyone's excited about, that's going to be a major hit. I do not think West Virginia can afford, Neil Brown can't, the same scenario that Will Grier had under Dana. Dana had his glory years, obviously, before it then went into the tubes. But Will Grier never played in a bowl game for the Mountaineers. It was 2 years, some big wins, some bad losses. I don't blame him when you have the NFL in front of you, but mediocre bowl, didn't play. I don't think JT Daniels can have 2 years where they either get in a bowl game, he doesn't play, or it's a mediocre game, or no one cares about it, and then say that's a successful situation. It got to be reasonable, but there's pressure on to get it done. There's more pressure on Neil Brown now than on Pat Narduzzi, because Pat Narduzzi has the special year to at least give him some rope off of last year. Neil Brown has yet to get that going, which maybe happens this year. Who knows? But there's pressure to make it happen of everything we've all said. And off-season wise, he's done everything he could possibly do. I don't know what else you possibly could do off-season wise, but it has to go onto the field.
I would agree with that 100%. I would say West Virginia wins and losses is kind of hard because you want to see progress. So I think he can get away with 7-5 as long as the offense looks much, much better.
Sure.
Maybe some injuries cause, a loss that we shouldn't have, or is a 50-50 against a great team, something like that. So there's some attachments on that 7-5. Otherwise, we need to go at least 8-4.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Mike,
I thought last year would be 8-4. I honestly thought West Virginia could go 8-4 last year entering the season. I'll admit that. I was totally wrong, obviously.
Deggy took a big step backwards. Deggy was the big letdown, and he took a step backwards.
He did regress, yeah.
Mike, we so much appreciate you being here, laying down the knowledge. It was a great conversation on all sides. Pitt, West Virginia, of course, everybody looking forward to the Backyard Brawl ensuing and getting back together for the first time in 11 years, that first Thursday night in September. Mike, again, we appreciate it. We would love to have you back at some point. Definitely. We enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had fun, guys, and it's a college football world, a world in general that never sleeps. So who knows? we go to bed tonight, wake up tomorrow, and everything could just be catastrophically different. You just never know. But yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Folks, if you've stumbled upon us for the first time, this is our West Virginia Mountaineers live show that we've now done 20 consecutive weeks, every Friday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time. But sometimes we've got to reschedule. So please hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. And by the way, Zachary and John asking when I sleep. I'm basically, you've heard of sleepwalking. I sleep talk. I'm programmed to talk college football all the time, and it just comes out. So I'm sleeping through half of these shows. You just don't know it.
He has micro naps.
He has micro naps, or you just bring a guest like me on. I can talk through it and get a good
Right.
5 minute break nap.
That's why you need sunglasses, Mark. You can never tell when I'm napping. I could have been half asleep when I'm not talking, and you would have never known.
Yeah,
that's it. That is it. Coos, we appreciate you, man. Everybody get on over to Coos's Corner right here on YouTube. And again, Gold and Blue, dude, these guys make it happen. They're the reason we've got a West Virginia channel here at the Voice of College Football. Guys, we appreciate it. And again, we'll do this again soon.
Thank you.
Awesome show. Awesome.